Welcome to Dr. Rebecca's Let's Talk Horses. May the force of the horse be with you podcast show, hosted by Dr. Rebecca Wara-Goss. In this podcast, we discuss all things horse-related, especially in mental health, research, human-animal bond, and the helping industries nationally and internationally, and explore the phenomenon of the horse-human connection.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Rebecca. Let's talk horses. May the force of the horse be with you. Today, my guest is Sharon Cabana. Sharon is a licensed marriage and family therapist in Oregon, USA, and works both in private practice and agency settings, and has worked for years in equine-assisted mental health treatment. In addition, Sharon is an educator and a professor at Lewis and Clark University, and is soon to become certified as an end-of-life doula. Welcome, Sharon. Thank you for being on the show today. Can you share a little bit about yourself and what drew you to the work that you do today?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I love May the Force of the Horse Be With You. It still cracks me up every time I hear it.
Super cheesy. But, you know, it's so nerdy and spiritual at the same time.
I love it. Star Wars would have been so much better with more horses, but it's still fabulous anyway. But yeah, so I'm originally from the East
100%.
Coast, right? Yeah, so I'm originally from the East Coast. I did a master's degree at the University of Illinois in anthropology with an emphasis in American Indian studies. And then kind of traveled around a little bit, moved back to Pennsylvania, even though all my family's in New England, and kind of just spent a few years trying to find myself, you know, the mid-20s lost sort of era that we all go through. And of course, it was like the economic collapse. And so it was hard to find a job. And so I kind of just, you know, floated around a little bit. And then I started volunteering with mental health and working in a local agency, providing peer support for individuals that needed a friend that were struggling with really severe mental illness and maybe didn't have access to local resources. And so you're taking them grocery shopping or out to eat or things like that. So they got some social interaction and some support. And then started applying for graduate schools again, figured that if the economy couldn't provide a job, I was going to create a career for myself. I really loved the work in mental health. I chose Lewis and Clark College here in Portland because they had a specialization in working with eating disorders, which is one of my specialties and a big passion of mine. And that's now where I adjunct faculty, and I teach a course on the animal-human bond, and I provide supervision for new students now, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. So kind of come full circle with
Very
my
cool.
graduate career there. And yeah, so it's just ever since then, it's been ongoing. I saw a presentation when I took the animal-human bond class with my my supervisor, and then now who's my soup of soup, who provides supervision for my supervision while I wait to become fully credentialed as a supervisor. And this woman came in from a local center and said, I do equine facilitated psychotherapy. And I was like, I want to do that. You can do therapy with horses? That's amazing. And so that's what started it. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about horses. And so I wrote to several different barns. I actually did at the time, EGALA, one of the models, Equine Assisted Growth and Learning Association of equine therapy, had 2 separate training days that you had to take. And so I did the first half of the training with them, and they were like, oh, no, it's okay. You don't necessarily need equine experience because you have an equine specialist in the sessions with you. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And I'm like, but that's a lot of legs. And that's a lot of like bodies in an arena. And I think I want to know what's happening when I'm in that arena, not just for my clients, but for me as well. And so I wrote to all these barns. And the barn that I wrote to that I've been now at for 7 years this year said, I have very little horse experience. I'm willing to work. I'm willing to put the hours in. And she said, well, I have a Sunday morning slot. No one has ever worked it for longer than 6 months. And but you're more than willing to give it a try. And so I started on the ground, like so many people with horses do, mucking stalls and, you know, feeding the horses and, you know, learned just from the ground, spent as much time as I could out there, took a lot of lessons. And really that's what led me to
Mhm.
where I'm at now.
That's wonderful. And can you describe what it is that you may do in your various roles? And that can be either, piggybacking off of with the horses and your role there as a therapist and what that's like, with maybe less legs than when you first started out, or your journey as a therapist, right? And what that's been like for you. Either way, however you like to share that.
Yeah, so I have a lot of different roles, kind of a Jill of all trades, really. And that comes through in my practice and that comes through in just my life in general. I have an endless thirst for knowledge. And so I'm always seeking to absorb. And if something catches my interest, then I dive in and I learn as much as I can about it. As a therapist, I see myself as a guide and a companion on the journey. And so every now and then somebody's journey goes in a direction that I wasn't anticipating. And so that always opens up new opportunities for me. So I'm also a student all of the time. I'm always learning. So I'm a student, I'm a companion, I'm a guide. In some ways, I can be an expert and I can give that expertise and training. I provide trainings on treatment for other clinicians. I provide supervision. I teach. I'm a Reiki master teacher in two different traditions, Usui and Kundalini traditions. I do martial arts. I love Tai Chi, and for a while I was doing Bagua Zhang and Kung Fu, and I've done Judo, and I've done Taekwondo, and I love the physicality of that. I've done a lot of fundraising with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and done half marathons and one full marathon, and I will never do another full marathon again. So I've
They're very popular ways to
never
support a
I crossed the
cause,
finish line.
but but it's not the only
It was
way.
an amazing, oh, such an
Yes.
amazing group of human beings. And I made it across that finish line, like dragging my right knee over the finish line. And I was the mental equivalent of a 2-year old. And all I could say was, I want my mommy. I want my mommy. And I couldn't find my mom. it was such, it was such an
Oh, very
experience.
humbling
And,
experience.
and so I'm like,
Wow.
very humbling. Yeah, definitely. And takes you down to your most primal
Definitely.
essence. And I was like, that's
Definitely.
it. I've been there. I've done it.
Yeah.
And I
Well, I
don't want
think
to do it
running is
again.
for emergencies.
So
I
yes,
only run when I have to run from from a perceived threat, or if I'm at an airport running from one terminal to the other. But yeah, but some people like to run and they love the marathons. But for sure, it does take a lot of effort and work.
right. Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely not a flight when, if there's ever like an emergency response, I'm definitely the freeze. I'm like, that's where I'm comfortable. I'm the
Yes,
tree. I'm the tree that
absolutely.
stays in
Absolutely. We will
place.
freeze and play dead together.
And
Yes.
trees don't need to move.
Let them get chased. Most creatures run after moving objects anyway,
Yep.
right? At least that's what they say in Jurassic Park.
No, I'm the
Well,
first to get eaten
well,
by a
well,
zombie.
unless it
I'm
was,
the first to get eaten by a
T
zombie.
Rex, and then you don't move, right? Jurassic Park, right? I learned a lot from that movie.
This is,
Yeah.
I love Jurassic Park. That holds up. The movie holds up, even though it was 1997. It's still an amazing
Yes.
movie. The book is still
Yes.
fabulous. The science is still
Yes.
like holding up. I'm like, that
Absolutely.
book,
Well, and
that is like, that's
definitely.
legit.
The writer is an amazing writer. And then I think he also wrote Demon in the Freezer. It's about, biohazard stuff with the smallpox. But then you have the incredible director, Steven Spielberg, doing Jurassic Park and probably doing the best they could at that time with the research about dinosaurs. um, Although I'm sure paleontologists are like, they're wrong. But it was so scary, It's just very similar to kind of how Jaws could be scary, right? With Spielberg's movies, just really good
Mm-hmm.
at
Yeah.
that. But coming back to us being freezing statues in states of emergencies, absolutely. And so what I hear you sharing is that it sounds like variety is the spice of life for you, and right, and being able to have all of these different experiences that you're able to then bring in with your clients and the work that you do.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
My clients point it out all the time. They're like, they're like the breadth of things that you talk about and that you bring in is expansive. And I think the more that I can do that, the more that I can relate to people that come from all different walks of life. And I always tell them, you're never getting the same therapist, right? So each one of my clients has a different therapist because I bring in different tools from my toolbox that each individual client needs to meet their needs.
Right. And that I would definitely think. Do you think that takes skill over a certain amount of time? Because it definitely sounds good and important, and I think, I mean, compared to when you first started as a therapist, as an intern, to now, right, with your breadth of experience, now it may, I'm just guessing, feel more comfortable to adapt and understand and have all of these tools to use from the beginning. So I'm just, because I guess my question was, that must take a really good, the word I'm using is skill, but
I
what
think
are
it
your
takes, I
thoughts on
mean,
that?
is authenticity a skill? I think is the good question, right? So I think when I started as a therapist, so in marriage and family therapy, we have quote unquote the mother, and we can talk about the politics of marriage and family therapy, but the mother of family therapy, Virginia Satir, and she had this amazing presence. And I loved to watch her videos, and I was like, oh, that's the therapist I want to be. I want to be the next Virginia Satir. I want to have that beautiful presence that she had and she brought to her clients. And so I started doing therapy, and I'm trying to sort of access that sort of persona. And I like to say, I was asked in a question about in an interview, what was I like when I first started therapy, and what was I like at that point. And I said, when I started, I was an anal retentive obsessive compulsive control freak with a paranoid fear of failure.
That is
Right.
very
And then
specific.
that is very specific.
Wow. Yes. Accurate, sounds
and
like, though, at
and
that
they said,
time for
well, how
you.
are you now? And I'm like, fine. I'm just fine.
Wow.
And I kind of went through this trial by fire with a lot. I had a really, really heavy caseload at my first job. And I really had to lean in. And I realized that I am not Virginia Satir by any stretch of the imagination. I am a very straight shot, sort of practical approach. My clients are always like, you call it, you're just real. And I think there's no greater compliment. It's kind of like the Velveteen Rabbit, right? When you can, you go through this trial, all of this pain, and in the end, you root in love, and love is real, right? And love is what makes you real. And so I found a real love for this profession. I found this real deep love for my clients. And so that allows me to be real with them. And so that's what allows me to do that. That's what allows me to access that breath, because there are things about them that generally interest me, and that encourages me to learn and keep growing. And
Yeah.
so I don't know if I'd call it a skill, but I just call it maybe a presence of being.
Uh-huh. Right, absolutely. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes of, only in a world of love can we unfold and bloom.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, definitely, I think for you to be able to approach your clients and give them your presence and authenticity, probably, and as their guide, as you've described, that must really help their own journey and pain and suffering that they've been dealing with. I was curious, do you mind sharing, just for some of our listeners who may not be aware of, what is an eating disorder? I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that or worry they may have one. Do you mind sharing a little bit about what that might mean, and that's what you specialize in, or at least one of the specializations that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, eating disorders, there's a lot in popular culture, a lot that is brought in, and a lot of misconceptions about them. And so, in the DSM, so that's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness from the American Psychiatric Association, there's a category of disorders listed as feeding and eating disorders. And there's 8 of them. And so the most common that we hear about in popular culture are anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder.
Hmm.
And there is also feeding disorders such as pica. Sometimes people you'll hear kind of like dark humor related to that. There's what's called ruminating disorder. And then there's ARFID, so that's avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. And essentially, an eating disorder is a disorder where what usually winds up happening is that there's a period of maybe extreme dieting. There could be a traumatic event, trauma, and is very closely related. Anxiety, OCD, depression, PTSD. All of these disorders really have a higher risk of developing eating disorders. And for whatever reason, whatever they have very complex etiologies. There's genetics, family systems, popular culture. So there's all of these different factors that influence the development of them. And what happens is that the person's relationship with food becomes really distorted. And so in anorexia nervosa, there's very severe restriction so that the person doesn't maintain a weight that's healthy for their body, has a paralyzing fear of gaining weight, that their self-worth is more often related to their body and body image and body size, and that they start to suffer some severe health consequences. There are two subtypes. There's restricting type, and then there is binge purge subtype. And the binge purge subtype is distinguishable from bulimia nervosa because usually the person in bulimia nervosa is able to maintain a healthier average BMI for their body. And then bulimia nervosa is, again, that sort of distorted relationship with food, the overvaluation of self based on body size and body image. Sometimes there's periods of restriction, and then there are these episodes of binging and purging. So binge episodes are eating more than a quote average person would eat in a discrete period of time. And then a purging is a compensatory measure. So that could be overexercise, laxatives, self-induced vomiting, all sorts of different techniques that people use to try to lose the weight of the binge or the perceived weight of the binge. And then binge eating disorder is the binge is a period of binging, right? And then the severity is determined by the number of times that they binge throughout the week. And it used to be there's an idea that medically that the purging was the more dangerous of some of these behaviors, but now we know that binging is also really impactful and dangerous for the body as well. And everything with eating disorders has really severe medical complications. These are very severe disorders. They have the highest mortality of any mental health disorder. The official numbers are about 5%. I've heard unofficial numbers of up to 20%. And this is largely due because there's some politics about what we can say when a person passes away. So an eating disorder cannot, in most states, be listed as a primary cause of death. So the primary cause of death would be heart failure, organ failure, seizure, et cetera, the medical consequence of the eating disorder. And then sometimes they can put secondary cause of death as an eating disorder, but that's only in some states. So we don't necessarily know all of those numbers as accurately as we maybe should. And so this is a very general, just kind of description of some of them. They have very specific criteria. But I would encourage anyone that's listening that if you have concerns about this or if you have concerns about somebody else, the National Eating Disorders Association, NEDA, their website is a great tool. It has lots of very general, easily accessible information. It has different phone numbers that you can connect to help resources. And there are many different organizations out there that provide specific eating disorder treatment. So it's critical usually for recovery to get access to professional care, specifically with eating disorder specialists. But there's a lot that you can do to support the person. A lot of really great resources out there, book resources, even documentaries and stuff like that to help you know more. But anyone that's concerned, NEDA is a really good place to start. And they do have a helpline to help get you going where you need to be.
Yeah, and for any of our listeners who know of someone who may have an eating disorder, they worry that someone does, or they themselves worry that they may have one, either they've been diagnosed before or just after listening to the descriptions today or reading about it online or something that they worry they may have it. What might treatment look like for them? Like what might recovery or what are some of those approaches that you've done yourself with some of your clients or that are, best recommended ways of working with someone who wants to try to get better?
Yeah, so there's a lot. Really, I would say that everybody's journey is unique, right? So what recovery looks like for every person is going to be different. And there's no one size fits all approach that works for every client. And so my approach, I incorporate intuitive eating. I incorporate the health at every size framework, do a lot of body positivity. And when it comes to the eating disorder itself, and so my treatment is okay, we're going to work on the eating disorder, but then we're going to work on everything else. We're going to look at the trauma that you've experienced. We're going to look at your anxiety and depression. And there's a big debate sometimes in the field about whether you can do that depending on the severity of the eating disorder. And there are 5 levels of care. These are federally determined, so these are the guidelines. And this is why eating disorder treatment is so critical as a team approach, because some of those guidelines are based on medical stability. So that looks at your blood pressure, whether you're something that's called like orthostatic. So that means that you have these really rapid shifts in blood pressure, depending if you're like sitting and laying down or standing up. They look at blood work, so a CBC, so your complete blood count. So we're looking at inflammatory markers. You're looking at liver and kidney functioning. You're looking at markers that indicate electrolytes like magnesium, potassium, iron. So when somebody comes into my door and says that they have an eating disorder, I give them a list of tests that I want their primary care doctor to do, and then I want to be able to review. If there's a child, I want to look at their growth chart, because BMI, while it's a guideline, there's a lot of politics around BMI. I'm not a fan of it at all. But for a child, especially under the age of 18, I want to look at their growth chart. I want to look and see if they've plateaued. I want to look and see if they've dropped, because a child's growth chart should pretty much kind of go in this kind of upward area of normal for their height and their weight. So if I see these weird shifts in there, then that's an indicator that there's something going on with their relationship with food. And so, and of course, always start with a really thorough assessment. Very frequently, when I get a screener come through, somebody might come in and think that they have binge eating disorder, but they actually have really severe anorexia. And what they consider a binge isn't an actual binge, but for them, it feels like a binge because they're restricting so heavily. And so what I need to actually work on is real nutritional stability, right? So a nutritionist with a specialist in eating disorders is another person that's part of the team. A psychiatrist may also be another part of the team. A coach might be another part of the team, someone that can help them with skills. And so it's a really complex treatment, even at the outpatient level, where we have a lot of people involved. We work on skills, we work on clinical work, we work on like the depth work, what I kind of call the soul healing. And then if a client's symptoms are too severe, then I need to give them access to a higher level of care. So I will refer them to intensive outpatient, which could be 5 days a week, 3 to 8 hours a day, depending on the program, where they're getting like lots of group therapy, lots of support, meal support, stabilization. And then the next level up from that is partial hospitalization, which oftentimes co-occurs with IOP. It's just a little bit more intensive. After that, there's residential, so where they will actually stay in a residential facility 24/7, and they will get specialized care. And then after that is hospitalization, which is the most severe level. And that's usually where somebody requires, 24/7 hospital care in order to get them to be medically stable. So a lot of clients will go through treatment multiple times and kind of go up and down the levels as they go through their recovery process.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like the team approach is important for a variety of reasons, for all the layers that have been going on for the person, right? So the habit, what's going on with their body, the whole reason why it started in the first place, the complex. And so I'm curious, for you, is there success in recovery, or what does that look like? Is there hope for people who are ready and are like, okay, Sharon, I'm ready, and they go through this process with the team approach, and understanding healing is not always a straight trajectory. There's ups and downs with that for sure, but kind of what you've noticed in your experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think sometimes there's a sense of hopelessness, especially with severe mental illness or addiction or eating disorders, where we say, oh, you're always going to be this. It's never going to leave you. And what I really identify recovery as, standard, we say, okay, if you were 2 years free of these behaviors, you can consider yourself recovered, and that's kind of been the ongoing debate in the field. But I like that. And I took that from Carolyn Costin, who's she's the founder of Montanito, very influential person in the eating disorder treatment community. And then I say that the marker for me of recovery is really how your relationship with your eating disorder changes over time. So, in complete disclosure, that I myself consider myself recovered. So I went through a period of about a year, 2 years, while I was an undergraduate. It was related to trauma, and I was anorexic, so I was with really severe overexercising. So we didn't have eating disorder resources in Pennsylvania. That's one of the reasons that I was so interested in this work, and why I was interested in Lewis and Clark. I'm like, why do we not have resources for people in rural areas? This is a major issue. And it was my friends who really helped me to recover. I mean, they literally would cut portions of food and then say, okay, you can leave the table when you eat this, like a child. And that's really what I needed, actually, was someone to really give me nurturing. And so that's how I recovered. And I often say, like, I recovered from, like a redneck cowboy, like we were just these backwoods coal country. And I don't necessarily recommend that as a treatment approach, but it worked.
And very often in the country setting, you're too far from the hospital, and a lot of times you treat your
exactly.
own, right? You take care of your own
And
health
the
and
whole,
injuries in the backwoods
yeah,
like that.
right. And the hospital, actually, I talked to people at the hospital when I started looking into mental health, and I was doing community gatherings about different topics like ADHD and depression and post-traumatic stress and stuff, and saying, okay, this is what we need to do. And I tried to, I was organizing one on eating disorders. I couldn't find anybody. Even there was a college there, it was college town where I did my undergraduate, and all of the counselors there were like, we don't do that. We're not working with anybody with eating. I'm like, wait a minute. The highest population of eating disorders cases are people between 18 and 24. These are college age, newly graduated, just leaving high school population. Why
Good question.
why is there nobody at the school that's able to work with this? And
Right.
so it really became kind of a social justice issue. But yes, absolutely, recovery is totally possible. And I remember driving home from a really intense day of work, and I had this bizarre urge to purge, and I was like, what? And I'm like, I've never purged. I hate vomiting. And I'm like, no, what is this? And then I went, oh, I am so stressed out. I am overwhelmed. And my body is trying to tell me that I am overwhelmed and it needs a release. And I said, okay, make a plan. What are you going to do? And I was like, all right, I'm not actually going to cook today. I'm going to go and I'm going to get like one of my like healthier new seasons options. I think I got like one of the rotisserie chickens or something like that, and made a side with that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give myself a nutritious meal, and I'm going to go take a walk. And I took like a 4-mile walk back around my house, which was my usual jaunt. And, I came home and I took like a long hot shower, and I curled up on the couch and watched something ridiculous on television or read a book. I can't remember. And I had my cats on my lap, and I just rested. And I was like, and it just absolved itself. And I realized, so what I look at recovery is that relationship with the eating disorder, right? If you give in to those sorts of behaviors, that they become overwhelming, that's a sign that you're still really struggling, right? Because you'll never change the neural pathways. The neural pathways are there, but your relationship with them can change.
Yeah, and thank you so much for self-disclosure and sharing about your own personal experience with eating disorder. And I know that you've described a little bit ago about being authentic and bringing yourself into your sessions from your multiverse experiences. But I think when you're working with someone like client that has gone through something you have gone through yourself, I can only imagine the level of relational empathy and understanding that has, because you know what that feels like, right? Your experience is different than theirs, right? But it's I just feel like that connection just may make that more powerful, and you having your own sense of recovery, bringing your own wisdom and experience to that work with your clients, compared to if you had never had issues with eating disorders, right? You can still try to come from sympathy, right, and understanding and compassion. But I think as you experienced it, you understand it and you understand the challenges of it. But does that sound about right to you, or what are your thoughts on that and the relational aspect of your own process of healing from stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it allows me to genuinely access hope for folks, and recognize the ups and the downs. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, look, recovery is not a line dance, it's a tango. You're going to get thrown around a lot, you know.
Can I keep the rose?
Yeah. That's what you get at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I just tell them that, I don't usually disclose. I talk a lot, and I've come to just realize that clients are going to see whether I want them to or not, and whether or not I disclose. They always see more of us than we know, and so I just accept that they're going to see what they need to see in me, and sometimes I disclose, and sometimes I don't. And that's part of their healing journey as well. And sometimes they're totally off, and I'm like, that is fine. That is what you need to see. That is part of your journey. It definitely, I think, allows me to connect with them, to have compassion and empathy for when it's going really hard, and to not take it personal when they need a break from their journey too. And kind of just allow myself, and definitely not to go in with the expert. They have taught me so much about what I didn't know, and so much about what I wasn't expecting. I'll never forget a client that recovered with 12 step. And that was something that was kind of not really, in the pedagogy that I was handed, was not very heavily emphasized at all. And it was kind of considered sort of fringy for recovery. And, uh, and so I started talking about intuitive eating and stuff, and explained that that was my approach. And they were like, I can't do that. And I was like, I'm like,
Like, well, that's honest.
yeah. And they were
Thanks for
like, I
letting me
can't do
know.
that. That doesn't work for me. And I'm never going to be able to do that. And I was like, okay. And, and I said, well, I'm not sure I'm going to be a good fit. And they were like, oh no, I like you. I think it's going to be fine. And I was like, okay. And so I started really just listening, and I had to really surrender any thoughts I had about what recovery was going to look like. And I really learned so much of what I didn't know. And so now I'm like, okay, what is going to work for you in your journey?
Mhm.
Because I
Mhm.
don't know, right? I
Right.
know what ideally I'd like to see. I'd like to see you healthy and happy in your body. I'd like to see you free from pain. And and I have some ideas of how to get you there, but you get to tell me if that's going to work for you or not. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I approach it now.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely from a place of witnessing. And so I'm curious, have you worked with clients doing equine assisted mental health therapy that had eating disorders? Or when you
Hmm.
were doing that work, what kind of clients would you work with, or why would they be coming to work with you using horses?
Yeah, so horses are magical beings, and I don't
I
say
won't
that
argue
say
with
that like,
that.
yeah, right. and
Agreed.
right, and they have a way of accessing something so deeply. And so when a client comes out and we look at them, they see little bits of themselves. Maybe, there's some real, like, just stulty sort of stuff that comes out. Like, there's a completion that happens when they interact with the horses, and the horses surprise me every time. I am not the primary therapist in those sessions at all, and I just sit there and make sure everybody stays safe. And I might demonstrate some horsemanship skills and stuff. So my approach is, I don't really follow a model. I'll be completely honest. I've kind of developed my own over time, based in horsemanship and spiritual counseling and my work in the animal human bond. And so when I get into session with them, I let the client connect with the horse that they feel. And there's been a couple of times where I've been like, like, that's who you're gonna pick. Okay. I'm not sure how this is gonna go. and the horse has completely blown me away. I think about a classic example I had was this teenager that came in with family, and it was the first time, one of our big old thoroughbreds, and just fell in love the minute they saw him, like just fell in love with him. And I was like, okay. I'm like, let me bring him in and see how it goes. And, he was like, at first he kind of looked at me and he's like, boss, what are we doing? Like, boss. And I'm just like, you be you, pal. Just you be you. I'm just going to. And he quickly picked up on the dynamics of the family. And it was so amazing because two of the family members were engaged, but one of the parents was kind of distant. And he would not engage with the family until all three of them were engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as the whole herd came together, they started, they were walking together, and then they were kind of like trotting next to him on like without the lead rope, and he just stood and paced with them, and he kind of just herded them a little bit and brought them together. And the more that he kind of played with them in this really gentle, sweet way, the more they were laughing and opening up with each other. And then they were laughing so hard they were crying, and then they were crying because they were experiencing such beautiful joy. And they stopped, and he knew, right? And then they realized, they were like, how long has it been since we've had fun as a family?
Mm-hmm.
And it really led to this realization that what they needed more than anything was each other. And so it was this beautiful moment of healing, right? And so even people who don't think that they're part can kind of get involved, as the horse therapist, it's like, come over here. You need to fix this.
Yeah.
And it was just truly, truly beautiful. And so I see that over and over and over again with them. And so I've worked with clients that have mobility issues. I've had clients that have had really severe health issues. And we still work together. And there's this gentleness that comes out in the horses where they know that, or babies, my horse, he's young, he's super green. I just dumped off him again last night.
Oh no,
So,
are you okay?
oh, I'm fine. Yeah.
You look
So
okay. I don't see any casts.
no, there's no pass. And
No casts this
so,
time. Okay, good.
no, my trainer gives me these dusty bottom ribbons every time I tank off a horse. So I'm developing quite a collection of dusty bottom ribbons with my dude. And he's inquisitive, and and he's just, and so, I had a client come in with their baby sibling, and I was a little nervous because I was just finishing up my work. Then I was going to go get the horse that I was going to bring into the therapy session. And the little one was just like reaching up and wanting to touch my horse Kai's face. And I was just like, you can come up. And I was like, just know he's still young, and he tends to want to feel things out with his lips. And the little boy just like reached up and very gently touched his face, and my horse just leaned in and just snarfed him, just gonna do like right into his side. And the little one just giggled and giggled and giggled, and then wrapped his hands around his nose, and they just hugged. And it was just the sweetest thing ever. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't take any pictures because you're a client and there's confidentiality, but I am melting. I am absolutely melting right now.
Oh.
And it's just these beautiful moments. Oh, my cat's griping over here, but just
Wow.
these
Yeah.
beautiful
She's in,
moments.
she's joining in the celebration of this beautiful moment between the young boy
She
and your
is.
horse.
And she says,
Wow.
no, you definitely you have to respect me here, Mama. Stop talking about my older
Yeah.
brother. Or well, I guess he's a younger brother, isn't he? He's just much bigger.
So Sharon, here's the big question for you.
Okay.
Why
Okay.
horses? What do you
Mm.
think is about them that makes it work in equine mental health and may not work? Trying to be fair, not trying to be too biased, because I totally think it does work. I get it. But in your own idea and your own experience, and it sounds like you came to horses later on in your life, which to me gives hope
Mm-hmm.
to people that didn't grow up with horses, that
Oh.
for professionals that may be interested in offering this, that it's okay for them to start learning and getting
Mm-hmm.
training with horses, and so they do become competent working with horses. So didn't want to say that, but it does sound like you didn't necessarily grow up with horses, but you've had almost a decade of experience now with horses, and you're sharing these really beautiful moments that you've seen with your clients that are unexpected, unplanned. So my question again: why horses? What is it about
Oh,
them, do you think, in your
why
mind?
not horses? So
Yeah, why? Why?
such a big question. Okay, so neuroscience, love neuroscience, right? And we share
Oh.
limbic, oh, yeah, and we share limbic similarity with horses, right? So they up and they down regulate, right? When you think about it, so for folks listening that aren't neuroscience geeks, the limbic similarity is essentially so your limbic system is that system in your body that relates to flight, fight, freeze. And that limbic nerve is your 10th cranial nerve, and it comes down through your body and it goes around your heart and your lungs and your gut. So whenever you're like, oh, I got a gut feeling this is bad, or like, the one person in the horror movie at the beginning that's like, guys, maybe we shouldn't go into the haunted house where there's a bunch of knives hanging everywhere. And everybody's like, no, it's going to be fine. And then they die. And you're like, you should listen to her. That's your gut brain, right? So that's your limbic brain. And that we share with horses. So horses are prey animals. They have evolved over thousands and thousands of years in their relationship with us. And we are predatory animals by nature. And so they respond with exquisite sensitivity to what we're experiencing in our internal environment. And we might not even be aware of what we are experiencing. And so, speaking of my guy, and him dumping me yesterday because he's been a little bit on edge. And so I got my trainer up on him for a few minutes today, and she goes, he's fine. And she goes, but how are you?
Oh.
She goes, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling overwhelmed? And I was like, immediately, of course, my eyes well up, and I'm like, yeah, I am feeling overwhelmed. And I'm like, oh, and I'm like,
Oh.
oh. And as soon as I let myself just kind of flow through that stress cycle
Hmm.
and breathe, he just curled into me for a cuddle. And she said, there he is. There you go. He's like, he's getting anxious because he couldn't connect with you because you were too overwhelmed and too in your head. And so they help us in so many ways to discover what we're experiencing that we might not be aware of because it's so in tune to our bodies, and we tend to think with our brains and not think with our bodies, and we forget that we think that we are thinking beings that sometimes feel, but we're feeling beings that sometimes think. And I forget who said that, but I stole it and I love it, and that is really the way we are.
You could just
And
put
so
dot
whoever I stole
anon.
that from,
Anonymous.
if
But
it's
yeah.
Donna, yeah, whoever it was that came up with that, you're brilliant and thank you. And let me know, let me know so I can credit you
Yeah.
whenever I use it.
You leave
Um,
either comments
but
below.
right, the comments below.
But
But
absolutely. So what was that again? It was we think we think a lot, but little feel little. We actually feel a lot, but think little. Is that what it was? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
right, yeah. So we have a tendency to think that we're thinking beings that sometimes feel, but we are really feeling beings that sometimes think. Right? And our bodies respond hundreds of times faster. That limbic system responds, that enteric brain, hundreds of times faster than our cognitive brain can. And
Wow.
when that system activates, it will actually disengage with the cognitive brain. So, in states of high anxiety, in states of trauma, in states of activation, our cognitive brain actually cannot function. And so, you can't do a cognitive intervention with someone that's somatically activated or feeling really stressed out in their body. And so, working with horses gives that sense. The horse can pull you down, can down regulate, and can allow you to be mindful in your body. And it's the ultimate mindful practice, right? In so many ways. And I mean, and that's just the neuroscience. And then you have horsemanship skills, right? So you take a horse and you let them free lunge in the arena, where the person has to learn how to direct with movements of their body. That if the movements are too big, the horse is going to get too excited. If the movement's too small, the horse isn't going to respect you. They're just going to keep going in whatever direction they want to go in. And so it's finding that balance of communication with an entity that is so much bigger than you are, that is just so much bigger and has a life of its own and a brain of its own. And you have to learn these subtle movements, and you have to learn how to regulate yourself and how to communicate in a whole new way. And so it builds confidence and communication and connection. And then you have this whole psycho-spiritual side of it, because they are magic beings, and it's that soul connection, right? And we always say, like, every girl needs a horse, and it's just this like magic thing.
I
And I think everybody
agree.
needs,
100%.
and I say everybody
Yeah.
needs a horse. All genders need a horse, right? Everybody needs a horse, because it opens up that sweet vulnerability and the soul wounds that we have. And it's just because of that prey and sort of way that the horses have developed as they are as beings. They love unconditionally. I had heard, and I don't know if this how true this is, it might just be anecdotal, that when the Arabian horses were initially bred, and my horse is an Arabian, when they were initially bred, they would run them out into the desert. And if they would run them into the point of collapse and exhaustion, and they would
Oh,
stop them right before an oasis. And if the horse ran to the oasis, then they were put down. They were culled from the herd. The horses that stayed with the humans were the horses that they eventually bred into the Arab limes. And they did that for ultimate loyalty, right? And because if you're in the desert environment, then you need to make sure that your horse isn't going to run away because you're dead. So, I mean, there was a whole like
ultimate
environmental, like
survivability.
survival, right?
Yeah.
A whole cultural reason for this, if this is true. But I think about that, and I think about that ultimate sort of partnership that develops in the relationship with a horse. And they typically say it takes about 3 years to really develop that relationship, where
That's good to
they
know.
know that they can trust you,
So it's not always
right?
instant.
No, no, oh no, it's so much work. My guy and I have been together for officially a year now. We passed our 1 year anniversary,
Happy
and both of us survived.
anniversary.
Um, and we're growing and learning and changing all of the time. And my trainer commented on that this morning, and she said one of the most beautiful things about your relationship is that you push each other to grow,
Oh.
and that's what makes your bond unique. And so she says, I need you to look back at all the original videos of the two of you and look at you now and look at how far you've come. And she goes, and it's just going to keep getting better. So you're going to get through it, and it's going to be fine. And my trainer is absolutely fabulous. And B, I think that really describes just the power of the relationship with them. And so you say, why horses? And I'm like, why not horses?
Uh-huh.
How anything but horses?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that was beautifully answered. Thank you so much. And I think you touched on so many different aspects of why we say why horses, and all
Mhm.
the various ways that we connect with them, and why, from biopsychosocial, mind, body, spirit, to species oriented, to training, habit, breathing, all of it, absolutely. So I guess my question for you, my next question is, what are your thoughts either as the growth of equine assisted mental health field now, where it's heading, this industry that, so for the listeners who don't know, equine assisted mental health is relatively new. And so since like the 1990s to now has been a big growth in popularity of professionals like licensed marriage and family therapists like Sharon, offering healing and mental health services with horses. And so it's grown a lot over the past 20 plus years or so. But, with your experience and where you're at now with everything, I guess, what are your thoughts on the industry or the state of the horse world today?
It is constantly growing and expanding. And I mean, the horse world in general is going through this, this kind of revitalization of like horse welfare, right? Like,
Big time. Yes.
one of the things, and about time,
Yeah.
one of
Great.
the things that I love,
But I think it
right?
was kind of
Yeah.
always
And
taken for granted. So now it's like, no, really, hello, we're really showing up for the horse this time with the equine welfare. I'm
yeah.
sorry, go ahead, I interrupted you.
Oh no, 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 absolutely. And totally agree. And it's an about time kind of thing. And so my horse wasn't gentle to ride until he was 9 years old. And so we're seeing this increasing movement, I think, of people that are waiting longer. So a horse, depending on the breed of horse, will typically mature around like 5, 6. Some mature around like 7 or 8. So like gypsies will the gypsy vanna horse will take a little bit longer. And so, saddling and working horses when they're really young and their teeth haven't even fully developed until they're about 5. So, like putting bits on them and doing all of this stuff when they're too young is going to impede their growth and development. And so, there's a big push about embracing biomechanics. So, my horse has something called sticky stifles, where his stifle joint, the ligament, is just a little bit, it's a little bit stiff. And so it kind of makes that joint, rather than moving smoothly, sort of lock a little bit as it goes up and down. And so all of the work that we do with training with him is to build the muscles and loosen and stretch those stifles, hopefully so that he doesn't have to get surgery for it. And it's all about his biomechanics, right? He gets a monthly massage. Let me just tell you the last time I got a massage, okay? And so, but he does. So equine massage and equine chiropractic, and of course your farriers, who are like the most important people in terms of the biomechanics of your
Right? No
horse.
hoof, no
So there's
horse.
a no hoof, no horse. Yeah. And so there's a big movement, I think, just in the horse community in general, to really nurture and give back to these beings that have given so much to us. And I think as an industry, we've definitely had problems, historically and even currently. And I think, I'm hearing more and more judges calling out, if there's a scratch on a horse or something like that, and they're being removed from big name competitions. There was just a recent case of two, I think, riders in this recent Olympics that are not going to be riding because of issues with the horse that the judge caught. So the judge caught something, and so they were removed. They were not eligible to compete anymore. And those are the kinds of changes, I think, that are just so absolutely important in the field, right? That we are paying attention to nurturing love and welfare. And when it comes to the mental health side of it, it's just exploding, right? And so I think that's got its pros and its cons, right? You have a lot of ad hoc folks that might be offering coaching or something like that don't have a lot of mental health experience, that might get in over their heads a little bit too much. You have a lot of models that are pushing and tugging against each other for kind of dominance about what is the best model and how to do it. But then you also have, so those are like some of the growing pains. But then you also have this really brilliant flourishing of like, no, this has legitimacy and importance, and that's what we need to focus on. And so when I think about like the future of the field and like what it needs, like it needs research, it needs participants, it needs community. And fortunately, I happen to know someone named Dr. Rebecca, who
Hey, what's
who's
up?
really
That's me.
trying
What's up?
to who's really spearheading a lot of this, which is great.
Doing my best. Doing my
And
best. But yes, we do
yeah,
need a lot of research in our field to understand.
yeah,
Well, not because you and I kind of get it, right? As mental health
mhm,
professionals, as lay women, we get it, right? We see it, we feel it, we've learned it. But the scientific community is always slow. And the scientific method is very slow. It takes a long time for there to be concrete changes. And mental health, especially, takes a long time to change. It's just kind of the nature of it. And so they just need constant proof and quotes of evidence based research to say, yes, it does work, even though pathologically and firsthand experience or case studies that it does help. So may not every person all the time, right? Want to be, somewhat modest, but somewhat modest. But at the same time, we do need research, and also so we have a better understanding, I think, of how it works as
yeah,
well.
definitely. And I think there's a big push in evidence-based practices, but I think the idea that evidence-based has to be quantitative is something that in the field that we just need to generally challenge, right? That
Right.
qualitative research, especially, you're never going to get a sample size of 1,000 and equine facilitated mental health. Nobody can have a facility with 1,000 horses. There's the old adage of, you know how you become a millionaire with horses, you start as a billionaire. And so it's very true that there's a lot of financial considerations in doing this work. And so, we're not going to get those big sample sizes necessarily. And so we need to reframe how we think about evidence base. And we can do statistical data from qualitative analysis. And I think we need to focus on that as well.
Mhm.
Um, and honestly, there's a lot of studies that show evidence-based practices don't have the longevity. They are excellent skill development for helping with acute symptoms, but they don't help with the soul healing. And that's where I think we need to be open to combining and integrating these methodologies so that we're holistically treating the whole person.
Absolutely, integrated care, and as you shared in your experience, that having a plethora, variety of spices, of variety of things that you can pull from that you've learned, right? Then that is how you're able to adapt and work with your clients. And so I agree. I think it's the same for science, and that it's hard because the same. I mean, I don't want to get too off on my favorite topic of the scientific method, but is that it's designed to disprove
Mm-hmm.
itself. So you have to demonstrate that it's right. And so there's just a lot of things that go into it, and it may not be the best construct to measure what we're trying to demonstrate, if that makes sense. And like outcome studies, right? And sometimes for people, like for our listeners who are interested in trying equine assisted therapy, or they tried it before, or they're interested either because private practice or traditional office based therapy didn't work, or they want to try something new. What do you think? How would a client find someone who works in mental health working with horses? I hardly ever see it advertised myself.
Yeah, so you have to know what's out there, I think. I think a lot of people are like, oh, when I talk to clients, they're like, that's a thing. And I'm like, yeah, it's a
Right.
thing. Um, and so you can Google. That's a good way. But I think, and part of it's on us as practitioners too, to get out into environments and make our presence known, the conferences and trainings, and really starting to say, hey, this is who we are, this is the community, and these are the resources that we provide, and this is how you find a provider. And so, a lot of big networks like that will do a find a provider sort of search. And so we could benefit from that. For the client, if you type in, so there's a million different names for the field, but if you type in equine assisted learning or equine assisted psychotherapy or equine assisted therapy, equine facilitated psychotherapy, equine facilitated therapy, equine therapy, it will lead you to people. It will lead you to connections, and then from there, sort of kind of finding it. If you're already involved with a mental health clinician, if you're already getting counseling, awesome. It's beautiful. It works as a wonderful secondary, so you don't have to leave your current clinician. They can work in partnership with each other, and so you might be able to find resources through your clinician. So there's a lot of really, we have our networks, we have our Facebook pages, we have our ways of connecting with other professionals. And so, getting our name out with other professionals, but then also that allows other professionals to like contact us so that we can do supplementary services for folks. So
Hmm.
you can find it. So
Perfect.
clinicians can find the clients and clients can find the clinicians, right? It's just a matter of reaching out and being a little bit vulnerable and saying, I want to do this.
Right, right. So definitely I hear there needing to be more outreach from professionals that offer equine services. And for clients to be proactive in stretching outside a little bit of their comfort zone, to just kind of explore their areas to see what might be offered. It's because there are a lot of places, whether it's small facilities or larger facilities, that do offer mental health services with horses. It's just kind of a matter of finding them. And so my last question for you before we end for today, Sharon, is any last words of wisdom that you'd like to pass on to other mental health professionals, either as a therapist, healer, educator?
Oh, that's so hard. Um, let's see. There's a Buddhist concept of beginner's mind, right? And it's the assumption that, when you become an expert in anything, that's when you really, you stop, you stop learning, you don't know. And so I would say that, if this work calls to you, go in with a beginner's mind, whether you're a client or whether you're a clinician, and let yourself experience, let yourself connect, let yourself be vulnerable, and really just embrace the beauty of the work. And when you're in this work as a clinician, know that you don't know and that it's okay. Because the minute that you open up that beautiful, trusting relationship with the horse, they will show you a level of healing and they will give you that gift. And they are willing to do that. And it is in their nature to do that. And it is one of the best blessings that we have in our relationship with these beautiful creatures. And so, lead from love and from humility and from authenticity, and it will bring you bright blessings and healing.
Blessed be. Awesome. Well, in closing, thank you so much, Sharon, for being here today, and for all that you have shared. I learned so much just from our chat today, and I wish you well in your endeavors. And thank you for the work that you are doing to help those who are in need.
Absolutely.
And I would like to thank our listeners for being present with us today. May the force of the horse be with you. And if you'd like to learn more about equine assisted mental health treatment and research, or about my nonprofit, Eudaimonia Equine Connections Inc., and the programs we're offering, please visit our website at www.equineconnections.org. That's www.equineconnections.org, equineconnections.org. Thank you all, and I hope you all have a blessed day.
If you enjoyed this episode, please click to follow, subscribe, and leave a review. And for all the show's notes and links, visit our website at equineconnections.org. For additional information, or if you would like to support this podcast show or Eudaimonia Equine Connections nonprofit programs with donations or sponsorship, or would like to be a featured guest on Dr. Rebecca's Let's Talk Horses, May the Force of the Horse Be With You podcast show, then please visit our website or email at info@equineconnections.org. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to have you here with us next time.